Takaru Kamishiro is an average, overworked, and not so handsome middle-aged man who absolutely hates his dull, joyless life. After another miserable day at his dead-end job, he flops onto his couch to binge some TV, his only form of therapy. But before he can even find a decent show, bam! He's suddenly teleported into a strange cosmic-looking room. Sitting across from him is what can only be described as Discount Hero X, a mysterious man who calmly announces that he's the one in charge of the solar system. Naturally, Takaru, still processing the cosmic kidnapping, blurts out, "Wait, are you an alien?" The guy smirks and replies, "Not exactly. Think of me as a god, at least, from your perspective." Apparently, this god manages the balance of life across countless planets. His strategy to prevent extinction: simple, throw random humans into new worlds and hope for the best. And lucky for him, but not for Takaru, our grumpy office worker happens to be next on the list. The god, let's call him Kami, politely offers Takaru a choice. He can refuse the offer, but since he's technically dead, his soul will just vanish. Poof, no pressure. Of course, Takaru argues that this isn't fair, and he's right, but fairness isn't exactly written into divine contracts. Seeing his panic, Kami tries to calm him down, saying he'll give him some special powers to make survival easier in the new world. The catch: he hasn't actually decided which powers yet. So, Kami pulls out a glowing notepad like some kind of celestial game dev, and starts brainstorming. Definitely magic. "Oh, let's give you max mana. Sounds balanced, right?" he mutters, scribbling away. Then he asks if Takaru wants anything else. Sensing his one chance to live the dream, Takaru requests something bold: "Can I have a big, goth girlfriend in the new world?" Kami, clearly regretting all his life choices, sighs and says, with that face, "That's ambitious. But fine, I'll see what I can do." To make up for it, Kami adds a few bonus perks: a super powerful search skill, global language understanding, and multiple debuff resistances. He's not entirely sure if he's even allowed to hand out that many OP abilities at once, but it's too late. Takaru's soul is already starting to fade. With a casual wave, Kami wishes him luck in his new life adventure. Moments later, Takaru wakes up lying under a tree in an unfamiliar forest. He quickly pieces together that he's been isekai'd, but now faces a bigger issue: what on earth is he supposed to do next? After some deep, and slightly hungry, thinking, he decides to walk in a random direction, hoping to find civilization. Luckily, he spots a village in the distance. Unfortunately, he's flat broke, 0 coins, not even a rusty spoon. Then he remembers his search skill. Perfect. Maybe he can gather materials and sell them. Holding a stick like a wizard in training, he shouts, "Search!" Nothing happens. Panic sets in. If he can't activate his ability, he's doomed to starve in a fantasy world. He starts scribbling possible trigger words in the dirt like a desperate man solving a crossword puzzle. Eventually, he tries simply saying "search" again, calmly this time, and voila! It works. Purple icons appear over nearby plants, and when he says "scan," a detailed description pops up. One flower is marked B rank. He has no idea what that means, but hey, it sounds expensive. With new motivation, Takaru starts collecting everything in sight, ready to turn fantasy foliage into cold, hard cash. After his search and scan experiments finally pay off, Takaru Kamishiro decides to go full harvest mode and collect every shiny plant in sight. For the next few minutes, he's basically a one-man lawnmower, gathering anything that even looks remotely profitable. By the end of his little foraging spree, Takaru has a full bag of stuff: herbs, flowers, leaves, and whatever else Mother Nature threw at him. Sadly, most of them turn out to be E-rank junk, which is basically fantasy world slang for worthless. Just when he's about to call it quits, something shiny catches his eye. A rock, but not just any rock. A pretty rock. His broke instincts kick in immediately. "Hey, maybe this one's valuable," he mutters hopefully, picking it up. Then he uses scan, and nearly drops it. Turns out, it's not a rare gem. It's just a big, shiny piece of monster poop. Gross, yes, but oddly, it's still warm, which is both disgusting and impressive in its own way. Takaru figures if people in this world buy weird stuff, maybe he can sell it too. With his treasures secured, he decides it's time to head for the nearby village and cash in. By nightfall, Takaru finally reaches the gates, where he's greeted by a guard named Marlowe, a short, stocky guy who looks like he's been guarding the same gate since birth. For a moment, Takaru isn't sure if he's really tall or if Marlowe is just fun-sized. When Takaru explains he's a material gatherer, Marlowe is genuinely surprised. Apparently, gatherers don't pass through here often. Still, he opens the gate and points him toward the village's general store, suggesting he sell his goods there. Inside the shop, Takaru meets the store owner, an older man with the classic merchant beard and sharp eyes that scream "I can smell profit from a mile away." Takaru politely asks if the man's willing to buy materials, then casually pulls out the poop rock. The owner's eyes go wide. Wait, this is incredible. I'll give you 5 gold coins for it. Takaru, confused but thrilled, accepts the offer, though he quickly asks how much that's actually worth. The owner explains that staying a night at a decent inn costs about 500 raves, and 5 gold coins equal 5,000 raves. Translation: Takaru just struck it rich selling literal poop. Encouraged by this financial miracle, the owner asks if Takaru has anything else to sell. When he empties his bag, the man nearly faints. Exotic plants, rare herbs, it's like a walking gold mine. He asks why Takaru came to such a tiny, remote village if he had so many valuable items. Takaru admits he just picked them up while walking here, which makes the man realize he's dealing with a seriously talented gatherer. Now intrigued, the shopkeeper leans forward and says he has a favor to ask. Takaru, expecting a side quest, because of course this is how these worlds work, agrees to listen. The request, to collect mithril ore from the eastern mountain, sounds easy, until the man mentions the area is crawling with monsters. Still, the reward is 360 gold coins, and money talks. So, after mentally adding possible death to his to-do list, Takaru accepts. That night, Takaru checks into a local inn, probably the nicest bed he's had in years, and finally gets a chance to relax. No boss yelling at him, no emails, no deadlines, just the peaceful thought that he got paid for selling poop. Life in another world might not be so bad after all. After a long day, the only thing that would make life better for Takaru is a nice, relaxing bath. But of course, he has no clue where to find one in this medieval world. Just as he's pondering that tragic fact, a housekeeper knocks and enters with a bowl of steaming hot water. Curious, Takaru asks what it's for, and the maid cheerfully explains that it's part of their premium service. Guests are given hot water to clean themselves. Then she adds, not so subtly, that his stench was so bad while checking in that her eyes almost started bleeding. Feeling both embarrassed and touched, Takaru thanks her for the gesture but says he'd really prefer an actual bath. The maid blinks at him like he's crazy. Only nobles and rich folks can afford proper baths, and he definitely has broke adventurer energy written all over his face. Realizing the tragic truth, Takaru falls to his knees in despair. No baths. What kind of cruel world is this? Noticing his melodramatic reaction, the girl hesitantly mentions that some wizards can use magic to clean people. That lights a spark in Takaru's brain. After all, Kami did give him the ability to use magic. Overjoyed, he thanks the girl, hands her a generous tip, probably more than he can afford, and sends her on her way. Once alone, he tries shouting, "Clean," just to see what happens, and to his delight, it works on the first try. The magic washes over him like an invisible car wash, leaving him spotless, but also making him moan in ways that would definitely get him weird looks if anyone overheard. So now the maid probably thinks he's into magical self-cleaning session. Still, the spell works perfectly, meaning Takaru doesn't have to worry about smelling like a swamp anymore, though he still dreams of soaking in a real bath someday. The next day, he heads out to collect more loot when he spots a new symbol on his search skill map. Excited, he checks it out, only to find a half-rotted skeleton lying on the ground. Turns out the poor soul's name was Belria, and judging by the remains, he died fighting here long ago. Inspecting further, Takaru finds a locket with a heartfelt note inside. It's from Belria's little sister, thanking him for working so hard to pay for their father's medical bills, and begging him not to do anything too dangerous. Clearly, Belria didn't get that memo. Feeling sorry for the guy, Takaru spends an hour giving him a proper burial, then draws a magic circle and casts a barrier to camp safely for the night. The next morning, Takaru journeys deeper into the forest of white trees, a place so creepy it looks like a haunted painting. It's rumored to be full of monsters, and he'd rather not step foot in it, but unfortunately, it's the only path leading to the eastern mountain. He casts a light spell to illuminate his surroundings and starts scanning for valuable materials, but strangely finds nothing. Even more suspicious, not a single monster in sight, despite the forest's terrifying reputation. But instead of questioning his luck, Takaru decides to seize the opportunity and stroll through the place like a tourist with death insurance. While sprinting through the forest like he's in an action movie, Takaru suddenly steps on thin air. Yep, he runs straight off the edge of a cliff. There's absolutely no way he's surviving a drop like that, so he starts yelling random spell words like a panicked gamer mashing buttons. By some miracle, shouting "fly" activates a floating spell, and he manages to land safely at the bottom of a cavern. 10/10 landing would almost look cool if it wasn't accidental. Now stuck underground, Takaru notices the cavern walls glittering with ores. Well, if he's going to be trapped, he might as well get rich, right? So, he whips out his tools and starts mining like a man possessed. He finds tons of valuable stuff like silver and copper, but no mithril in sight. Clearly, the universe doesn't want to make things easy for him. Determined, he ventures deeper into the caves. His search skill soon pings an ore hidden inside a rock wall. Just as he moves toward it, the entire cave begins shaking like a toddler with a rattle. He steadies himself and uses a small fire blast to break through. Lucky break, it's mithril ore. Well, a tiny piece, but still worth celebrating. Then the ground trembles again, louder this time. Takaru's survival instincts scream, go home. But since he clearly has negative self-preservation skills, he decides to keep exploring anyway. Eventually, he stumbles into a massive open chamber with a glowing underground lake. It's stunning, like nature's own LED pool. Using his skin ability, Takaru discovers it's actually S-rank ancient dragon magical water, the rarest kind there is. Jackpot. Well, except for that ancient dragon part, which doesn't sound super friendly. And sure enough, as soon as he dips his hands into the water, the lake starts bubbling violently. Something enormous rises from the depths, and boom, Takaru finds himself staring at an actual ancient dragon. The dragon roars at him for trespassing in its lair. Its aura heavy enough to crush ordinary men, but Takaru just stands there like, hi, completely unfazed. Maybe he's brave, or maybe he just doesn't realize he's supposed to be terrified. Realizing he's at fault, Takaru apologizes sincerely, which completely throws the dragon off guard. No one has ever been that chill in its presence before. Amused, the dragon softens up and introduces itself as Voldia. It then sniffs the air, as dragons do, and remarks that Takaru's mana is absurdly high, possibly even higher than its own. Takaru, being the humble, clueless guy he is, has no idea what that means. Voldias then makes a strange request. It wants Takaru to help hatch its egg. Turns out, the dragon doesn't have enough mana to do it itself. In return, it promises to give him a massive chunk of mithril ore. Sounds like a fair trade, so Takaru agrees and begins channeling mana into the egg. Everything seems fine until the egg suddenly starts draining his energy like a magical leech. Within moments, Takaru collapses unconscious. When he finally wakes up, a tiny baby dragon is sitting right in front of him, chirping adorably. He quickly realizes the hatching worked. Voldias is overjoyed to see its child alive and well, then immediately asks Takaru for one more favor. Could you, take care of my kid for a while? Because of course. Nothing says, isekai vacation, like becoming a single dad to a newborn dragon. Takaru looks at Voldias in disbelief. He asks if the dragon is really sure about this. After all, shouldn't a parent want to raise their own child? But Voldias insists. He says Takaru possesses far greater strength and mana than he does, so his offspring would be much safer growing up under Takaru's care. Then, as casually as possible, Voldias mentions he's some milk to buy at the bottom of the lake, before slowly sinking back beneath the water, basically disappearing and leaving Takaru to figure out parenthood on his own. And just like that, Takaru becomes a babysitter for a newborn dragon named B. After eventually finding their way out of the cave, Takaru realizes the sun is already setting. Traveling through the forest at night would be a terrible idea, so he decides to set up camp until morning. He tells B to get comfortable and begins pulling things out of his storage bag. Among his loot is the ancient dragon magical water, which he knows is essential for a young dragon's growth. He pours some into a cup and offers it to B, who happily gulps it down. But after finishing, she pushes the cup back toward Takaru, chirping for him to drink some too. Takaru hesitates. After all, this is water that's probably been part of a dragon's bath for a few centuries, but he doesn't want to disappoint her. So, he takes a sip. To his surprise, it's actually pretty refreshing. Once they're both hydrated, Takaru gets to work setting up camp. He places several magic stones around to form a protective barrier. In this world, those things are considered extremely valuable, but Takaru can casually make them just by focusing his mana into his palm. Talk about being unintentionally overpowered. This time, he creates a heating magic stone and uses it to prepare dinner. Grilled steak with a side of hearty meat stew. The smell alone is enough to make anyone drool, and judging by B's face, she's more than ready to dig in. Takaru isn't sure if it's a good idea to feed solid food to a dragon that was literally born 2 hours ago, but he decides to trust his instincts and serves her a small bowl anyway. Predictably, B takes a big bite and instantly yelps in pain. The stew's way too hot. Trying not to laugh, Takaru cools it down by blowing on it and offers it back to her. This time, she takes a careful sip, and her eyes light up. She absolutely loves it. Seeing B wag her tail and happily munch away makes Takaru smile. Still, he can't help but wonder how she feels about leaving Voldias behind. When he asks, B tilts her head in confusion, then hops into his arms and hugs him tightly. Why would she miss Voldia, her big scary dragon dad, when she's got Takaru, her warm, squishy human dad, right here? Takaru decides to use his appraisal skill on B, and what he finds absolutely blows his mind. Despite being tiny, round, and dangerously adorable, B is already B rank. Not only that, but she's got a list of terrifyingly strong-sounding abilities like limitless evolution. In other words, she's destined to become way stronger than Takaru someday. Still, being the responsible dad that he is, Takaru tells her very seriously that she's forbidden from doing anything reckless. Unfortunately, B is far too busy chasing her own tail to hear a single word of that lecture. The next morning, Takaru begins the long climb back up the cliff. Once he reaches the top, he's shocked. The once creepy forest now looks completely normal, as if the horror movie setting from last night never existed. He briefly wonders if he's just hallucinating from lack of sleep, but then decides, not my problem, and moves on. Since he's already here, he figures he might as well do some gathering. Activating his search skill, he scans for nearby C-rank materials. Just as he's about to start collecting them, becomes flying toward him in a total panic, squeaking that something scary is in the woods. Takaru immediately switches his scan to detect hostile monsters, and sure enough, half a dozen red blips appear on his radar, heading straight for them. He sighs. He really doesn't enjoy fighting, but come on, a few low-level monsters. Child's play. Suddenly, a rock griffin swoops down behind him. Compared to Voldia's, though, this thing might as well be a chicken with wing. And hey, grilled chicken sounds amazing right about now. He quickly casts Shield, followed by Ice Needle, summoning 3 shimmering icicles that pierce the griffin in one clean strike. Boom. One-shot dinner. Before he can celebrate, a pack of wolves comes charging out of the brush. Of course, he mutters, they smelled the free buffet. Takaru activates enhancement magic to boost his speed, leaps into the air to dodge their first strike, then casts hardening on his hands and feet. He lands like a meteor, kicking one wolf's skull in with an axe kick and finishing off the rest in a flurry of spells and punches. When the dust settles, he's surrounded by meat, enough to host an all-you-can-eat barbecue. But as he looks around, his smile fades. There are still more monsters in every direction. If he tried fighting them all, he'd be here for the next fiscal quarter. Sighing, he mutters, if only there was a way to just fly out of here. And right on cue, Bee grabs the back of his jacket and starts flapping her wings furiously. At first, Takaru thinks she's just being playful, until his feet actually start leaving the ground. Wait, you can actually lift me. Turns out, Bee may be small, but she's freakishly strong. The only problem. Her flight speed is roughly equivalent to an old man climbing stairs. At this rate, they'll escape the forest in 4 to 5 business days. Not wanting to die of boredom midair, Takaru casts weight reduction magic on himself to lighten the load. Bad idea. The instant the spell activates, Bee and Takaru shoot straight into the sky like a living rocket. Unfortunately, Bee's still a rookie pilot, and halfway through their chaotic flight, she loses her grip. Bee. And just like that, Takaru goes from Father of the Year to Meteor of the Month, plummeting toward the ground at terminal velocity. Somehow, Takaru managed to survive that brutal fall, a miracle that definitely outweighed the mild hip fracture he picked up along the way. On the bright side, they shot straight out of the white forest in mere minutes. Talk about efficiency. They're pretty close to the village now, but Takaru doesn't exactly trust flying on Bee, so he decides it's safer to just walk. Along the way, Bee starts nudging the stick in Takaru's hand, obviously curious. It's, a branch from the Idrisil tree, Takaru explained. The god just gave it to me in a bag, so yeah, magic stick, I guess. Feeling inspired, he waves the stick around, pointing at random objects to see what happens. Bee seems to understand the stick's potential because she breathes a cloud of magic onto it, and, just like that, the stick awakens into its true form. Takaru has no idea how or why that worked, but hey, magic. Before he can even think about it, a loud growl echoes from the forest. Takaru braces himself for a fight, only for Bee to fly straight into the trees, dragging him along on an impromptu chase. They eventually find an elf girl slumped against a tree. Takaru rushes over, worried she's been attacked by a monster, but she shakes her head. I'm fine, she croaks, her stomach clearly louder than her voice. I'm just hungry. Haven't eaten or drunk anything in 3 days. She practically begs Takaru for some ration. He can't leave her like that, so he digs into his bag and offers her some water, along with his packed lunch. The girl's eyes light up like a kid in a candy shop, and she devours everything in mere second. Once she's finally satiated, Takaru has a few questions. Mainly, how does someone get lost in the middle of the woods for 3 days when the nearest town is just a day away? The girl blushes and admits she got lost because she was in a hurry. Still, she should have brought some rations, even just a couple of days worth. But nope, she brought nothing. Trying to think of an excuse, she edges way too close to Takaru, and he immediately realizes that, well, she smells. It's not my fault, she protests. I had to survive in the wild for days. True, he thinks, but that doesn't change the fact that she currently reeks like a manor basement. Finally, the girl stands up, grateful yet offended. Thanks for saving me, she says, but calling me smelly. Rude. With that, she dashes off without asking for directions or picking up any supplies. Takaru can already guess she won't make it very far, but that's her problem, not his. So he turns back, shrugging, and continues the journey toward the city, Bee flying loyally by his side. Eventually, Takaru and Bee make it out of the forest and onto the main road. Bee perks up, spotting a carriage approaching, so Takaru stops to talk to the driver. The man notices Takaru's staff and raises an eyebrow. Are you a sorcerer? He asks. Well, Takaru admits, I could be if I wanted to, but I prefer peaceful jobs. I'm just a gatherer with a staff. The man then asks why Takaru is all the way out here. He explains that he's heading toward Hormi village. The driver's eyes widen. On foot? That's quite a trek. Not like Takaru had much of a choice. Seeing his predicament, the driver offers a ride. Takaru appreciates the gesture but hesitates. He's a pretty big guy. And Sophia, one of the family members already in the carriage, looks concerned that he might take up too much space. Both the man and his family assure him it's fine, so Takaru clambers into the carriage. Something he's noticed since coming to this world, children seem to naturally like him. He's not sure why, but it does make life easier. If the kids like him, most adults are automatically friendly. He thanks the family for the ride, but they shrug it off. Everyone in Tormei helps each other when they're in trouble, they say. Takaru smiles but can't help thinking they're maybe too trusting. He could have been a bandit for all they knew. That's impossible, the driver says with a wink. If you were bad, this bell would have rung. We'd never offer a ride to a villain. Takaru is amazed. Bells enchanted with magic stones can detect bad people. Genius. He makes a mental note to craft one for himself later. Just then, Yunan, the daughter, notices a strange rustling sound coming from Takaru's jacket. What's that? She asks. Reluctantly, Takaru explains that he's brought a rare monster with him. He expects them to freak out, but instead, the family is completely unfazed. Adventurers keeping monsters as pets is normal, they say. Relieved, Takaru decides it's safe to let Bee out. But no biting anyone, he warns. The children are immediately smitten. They squeal at Bee's cuteness, while Eliza and Porin are even more impressed that Takaru managed to tame a dragon cub. Are you a dragon knight? They ask. Nope, Takaru replies casually. I just found and hatched her while on a mission, totally by accident. As night falls, Takaru sets up a protective barrier around the carriage. He assures the family that as long as the barrier remains up, no monsters will get near them. And if anything does manage to sneak close, Bee will sound the alarm, the family's personal dragon security system. Everyone was glad to know they were safe for the night, but dinner still needed to be sorted. Eliza got ready to start cooking, but Takaru quickly intervened. Mind if I handle the meal tonight? He asked, reaching into his bag and pulling out a full set of pans. The kids were amazed. There was no way all that could fit into such a small sack. It's like an item box, Takaru explained. There's way more space inside than it looks. Super handy for gathering stuff. Once Takaru finished cooking, everyone dug in. They were delighted by how delicious his food was, especially Porin, who was tired of eating dried meat all the time. As the night went on, they sang songs and danced to pass the time. The kids even invited Takaru to join. He had never experienced anything like this back on Earth. Nights were usually spent alone, staring at a TV, but sharing a meal and fun with others was far more enjoyable than he ever imagined. The next morning, Takaru woke up and started cleaning his scissors to pass the time until it was time to leave. Poland told him they could head out after breakfast, but Takaru had a small favor to ask. I've never driven a carriage before. Mind if I give it a try? Poland shrugged. Sure, go ahead. Before long, they arrived back at the village. Takaru hopped down from the carriage, and Poland thanked him for sharing his food. No, I should be thanking you, Takaru replied. I didn't have to walk all the way back on my own. The family drove off, and the short guard watching them leave muttered, it must finally be spring. Spring? What does that mean? Takaru asked. The guard explained that Poland was a weaver who frequently traveled to warmer regions for work. The journey was tough on him and his family. Unable to hunt, they had to survive on meager ration, which explained why he had been so happy to taste Takaru's food. Learning about Poland's struggles made Takaru realize just how lucky he was to have abilities that allowed him to gather materials easily. A little later, Takaru returned to Jerome's store to deliver the materials he had gathered, but he had a little test in mind. He slipped one piece of the magic mithril ore he had gotten from the dragon's den in with the regular mithril, curious to see if Jerome would try to scam him. Jerome spent a long time examining the rocks. Eventually, he concluded that one in particular was indeed magic mithril ore. A few of these contain enough magic to replace most of the magic stones in the kingdom, Jerome said. Takaru feigned surprise, even though he already knew the truth. Jerome told him it was amazing that he had managed to find something so valuable. Takaru, of course, tried to downplay it. I just happened to come across it on my trip, he said, trying to sound casual. Even when Takaru claimed he had found it lying at his feet, Jerome shook his head. It still takes skill to find things like this, he said. Then he added, you'd be better off heading to the city of Belsum. It's much larger than this village. You'll find a wider variety of items to buy and sell than you would here. Though Jerome hated the idea of letting talent like Takaru leave, he requested one thing. When Takaru eventually made a name for himself, he should send a few extra customers Jerome's way. Takaru didn't plan on becoming famous, but the thought of exploring a big city did pique his interest. Back at the inn, Takaru did a bit of research and discovered that Belsum had an adventurers guild that brokered requests all across the country. Adventurers were divided into combat, support, and various other roles. Since he was in another world now, he figured he might as well try adventuring and traveling for a while. Joining the guild seemed like the perfect plan. But first, there were still a few tasks to finish in Tormei. He headed into town to find someone to process all the monsters he had caught. While waiting, he spent the night partying with the villagers and enjoying a hearty feast. The next morning, Takaru returned to the butcher. With all the monster parts processed, he now had enough food and seasoning stock to last the duration of his journey. The woman working their side, saying it would be lonely without him around, and that many villagers wished he would stay a bit longer. "I'll miss this place too," Takaru said, "but there are so many exciting places to visit and new people to meet. I can't settle down here yet." The woman understood and didn't push the matter further. But before he left, she handed him a bag. "Here, I packed you a travel lunch." Actually, it was more like a ton of travel lunches. Clearly, Takaru wasn't going to worry about food for a while. Afterwards, he returned to his room. The only thing left to figure out was what to do with the magic mithril. Jerome had told him he couldn't afford to buy it, so Takaru had no idea what to do with such a valuable resource. Tossing it out was unthinkable, but since it contained so much magical energy, he wondered if he could use it to create something useful for the villagers. After all, they had been nothing but kind to him. Just then, Takaru noticed his lamp sitting on the table, and an idea struck him. He grabbed the magic stone and tried combining it with the lantern. It didn't take long for him to figure it out. After a bright flash, a brand new magic item had been created. The next morning, as Takaru was about to depart, the entire village came out to see him off. He thanked them for everything they had done and, as a gesture of gratitude, presented them with the magic item. He explained that it would create a protective barrier around the village, keeping out anyone with malicious intent. The villagers were grateful but hesitant. "Is it really okay for us to take something so valuable?" they asked. Takaru waved off their concerns. "It's the least I can do to repay you. Besides, I want to make sure the village is safe in case I ever come back." Jerome, curious about the device, peeked inside and saw the magic stone powering it. The stone alone was worth a small fortune. He opened his mouth to protest, but Takaru had already dashed out of the gate. There was no turning back now. As he walked toward Belsum, he took a moment to enjoy the peaceful scenery. His moment of calm, however, was short-lived. He soon came face to face with a giant crab in the middle of the road. After the initial shock wore off, he scanned the creature's stats. Nothing extraordinary, but once he realized it was edible, he decided that he and B would be having seafood for dinner that night. Takaru cast enhancement magic on himself to prepare for the fight. Before he could take action, B flew ahead and unleashed a sonic scream, knocking the crab unconscious. Takaru was impressed. He had no idea B could do that. The battle, however, wasn't over. Two more crabs appeared. Takaru thought he was safe in the middle of the road since crabs usually only move sideways, but he was dead wrong. These crabs charged forward with surprising speed, surrounding him. Just as one was about to smush him, B swooped in and pulled Takaru into the air, causing the crabs to collide with each other instead. He thanked B for her quick thinking, but the first crab regained consciousness and charged again. Takaru summoned his staff and smacked it straight into the air, finally defeating it. With all the crabs dealt with, it was time to prepare their meal. He cast hardening on his arm, turning it into a makeshift knife, and began carefully removing all the claws and legs. A few minutes later, Takaru had prepared all the crab limbs for boiling. He pulled out a giant pot, don't ask where he got it, added the crab, water, and a generous amount of salt. After a few hours of boiling, the crab meat was finally ready. Takaru and B dug in, and both were blown away by how delicious it tasted. From that day on, Takaru resolved to hunt monsters not just for survival, but also to try all sorts of new and exotic meat. A few days later, Takaru and B arrived at the gates of Belsum. He was amazed by the sheer magnificence of the fortress walls. A long line of people queued for inspection, so he joined in. Before his turn, he decided to disguise his magic bag. It wouldn't be good if the guards discovered his infinite storage. When it was finally Takaru's turn, he was called into a separate room. One guard began inspecting his belongings while the other asked about his business in Belsum. Takaru explained that he was here to join the Adventurers Guild. The guard nodded. After all, Belsum hosted the largest guild on the continent. Though he didn't find Takaru suspicious, the guard still needed to do his job. He told Takaru he would skin him with an Avaros. Confused, Takaru asked what that was. The guard explained that it was a device to check if someone was suspicious. Takaru didn't mind. Better this than a full cavity search. After a few seconds, the guard confirmed that there was nothing unusual. Curious, Takaru scanned the device himself and saw a stat window pop up. It simply noted that he could use magic. Luckily, none of the God-given abilities, his ridiculously overpowered stats, showed up on normal scans. The guards cleared him to enter, but one had one final question. Why did Takaru have the blessing of the dragons on his stat screen? Takaru explained it was probably because of his pet. He called Bee out, and both guards were immediately in awe of how cute she was. There were no rules against owning pet dragons in the city, so Takaru was allowed to bring her. The guard informed him that he would need a tag on Bee to prove ownership in case anything happened. Takaru realized he hadn't brought a collar, but then remembered the lucky charm Poland's kids had given him a few days ago. Smiling, he slid the charm onto Bee's tail, solving the problem perfectly. The guard nodded and said that the lucky charm was good enough. The only thing left was to file a report with the mayor that a dragon had entered the city, but Takaru didn't need to worry about that. His bag was returned, and the guards pointed him toward the main road, which would lead straight to the Adventurers Guild. As Takaru took his first steps into Belsam, the city proved to be even more magnificent than he had imagined. He suddenly pointed toward a large building at the end of the street. It had to be the guild. He headed inside and looked around. A woman named Europa soon approached him, warmly welcoming him to the Adventurers Guild. They were always happy to register new adventurers. She led him to the reception desk, where he was introduced to the receptionist, Ariana. She asked him to fill out his name and current occupation on the form. That sounded simple enough, though Takaru briefly wondered why he could understand this world's language at all. After completing the form, Ariana asked if he had any combat experience. Takaru casually mentioned that he had taken out a griffin, several wolves, and a couple of crabs. While impressive on paper, Ariana wasn't entirely convinced, so she asked if he had proof. "I do," Takaru replied, "but it's pretty big. Is it okay if I bring it out here?" Ariana thought it shouldn't be a problem. To her shock, Takaru pulled out a giant crab and dropped it right on her desk. The desk collapsed under its weight, and Takaru winced, realizing he might have overdone it, but in his defense, he did warn her it was large. Guild patrons crowded around to see the commotion. The guild master appeared, asking what was happening. Takaru explained he was just showing Ariana the crab. The guild master noticed Takaru's item box and immediately asked where he had gotten it. Takaru said it was a gift. Using his scanning ability, the guild master verified the truth. His version of scanning revealed a person's aura instead of a stat screen, showing whether they had good or bad intention. Seeing that Takaru was fine, he decided there was no need to punish him for a harmless mistake. The master said they could appraise the crab and issue payment by the end of the day. Takaru casually added that he planned to eat the crab later, shocking everyone present. The crowd only grew larger, so Ariana led him to the next room to finish his registration. Sitting at a new desk, she told him the crab had definitely proven his combat ability. She completed his registration and slid a guild armband onto his arm. While she knew Takaru deserved a higher rank, guild rules required all new members to start at F rank. With his skills, though, ranking up would only be a matter of time. The next day, Takaru decides to track down the family of Balluri, the poor guy he'd found dead in the woods, so he can return a few of his belongings and deliver the sad news. When Balluri's family hears what happened, they're absolutely heartbroken, especially since they'd told him not to go adventuring. But Balluri had insisted on it so he could earn money for his father's medicine. Looking around, Takaru can see that the father is still very ill, and guilt starts eating away at him. He wishes there was something, anything, he could do to help. Afterward, he heads over to the guild to sell some herbs, and the clerk is practically glowing with excitement over how massive his mushrooms and leaves are. Honestly, they look like they've been growing at a gym. Just then, Ariana shows up, calling out for Takaru. Apparently, he's become quite the local celebrity because the guild board is overflowing with jobs personally requesting him. Takaru blushes a bit at all the attention. He's flattered, but he's also not exactly built for multitasking. So, he decides to accept only a few of the requests for now. Later, he heads to the bathhouse to relax and enjoy a long, peaceful soak. But his peace doesn't last long because Clay suddenly walks in and sits right next to him. Takaru is surprised to see him. Clay usually comes at a different time, but he explains that it looks like it's going to rain, so he wanted to sneak in a bath before the storm hits. As they sit in the steamy water, Clay glances at him and asks if he knows healing magic. He's heard rumors that Takaru healed a sick man in the slums for free. Takaru admits it's true, and Clay nearly slips under the water from shock. For free. Most healers charge enough to make your wallet cry. Takaru, ever the humble overthinker, suddenly worries that all the professional healers might get mad at him for undercutting their business. The fact that that's his biggest concern makes Clay burst out laughing. Between chuckles, Clay tells Takaru that he should really take the rank assessment test and move up in the guild ranks. But Takaru just waves him off. I'm good. I kind of like my quiet life, he says, sinking deeper into the bath like a man fully committed to relaxation over ambition. Clay can tell that Takaru is a pretty chill guy, but he warns him that acting too laid back in this world will eventually attract the wrong kind of attention. As he leaves the bathhouse, he advises Takaru to start learning a bit more about how things really work in this world, before it's too late. Later that day, Takaru delivers another batch of herbs to the guild. The clerk thanks him for his hard work but once again begs him to consider taking the rank-up exam. With Takaru's skills, a higher rank would be a walk in the park. But Takaru just smiles and insists that he's happy exactly where he is. He has zero intention of going beyond F rank. Just then, chaos breaks out in the guild hall. Apparently, a horde of goblins has been spotted near the city. The guild master immediately issues an emergency order, calling for all D rank and above adventurers to mobilize for battle. He then asks his receptionist if there are any A rank adventurers available to join the fight. Unfortunately, most of them are already out on assignments. The only one left in the city is Clay. The guild master breathes a sigh of relief. Well, at least we've got the honorable Dragon King on our side, he mutters. Then he instructs Mui to go and inform Clay of the situation right away. Takaru, meanwhile, watches all the commotion from the corner with the energy of a man who just wanted to drop off herbs, not go monster hunting. He knows he could easily one-tap the entire goblin army if he wanted to, but since he's technically still F rank, he doesn't feel obligated to lift a finger. Unfortunately for him, the guild master sees right through his innocent bystander act. Narrowing his eyes, he points straight at Takaru and declares, "You're coming too, whether you like it or not." A short while later, all the adventurers are assembled in the plaza as the guild master outlines the battle plan. The goblin army is currently advancing across the southern Stavlaw plains, and if left unchecked, they'll be heading straight toward Belsum. They can't let the goblins make it past the city wall, so the guild master orders everyone to intercept them at the Zawis River. The entire guild is hyped and ready to defend the city. Well, everyone except Takaru, who's wondering why he even got dragged into this mess. Two adventurers nearby notice his F-rank badge and immediately start whispering, "Why is a weakling like that guy here?" Just as Takaru contemplates pretending to faint, the guild master strolls over. He admits he's not totally sure why, but all his staff have been singing Takaru's praises non-stop, so he figured, why not throw him into danger too? Technically, he's not allowed to force an F-ranker into combat. The Union would chew him out for that, but there's no rule against asking Takaru to collect valuable monster drops from the battlefield. So, it's a win-win for everyone except Takaru. After the guild master leaves, Musley apologizes to Takaru, saying she has no clue why he's being sent to the front. Still, she promises to do her best to support him. Takaru, confused, asks what she means, and she explains that she knows a bit of healing magic and will be serving as a medic. That makes sense to Takaru, but with how overly enthusiastic she seems about a deadly battle, he can't shake the feeling that something's about to go horribly wrong. Sure enough, once they reach the outpost, Musley immediately gets startled by a bird and latches onto Takaru's arm like it's a lifeline. Takaru, deadpan, tells her to let go, but she insists she's not scared at all, despite shaking like a leaf. He sighs and reassures her that they're stationed at a rear outpost, far from any actual fighting, so the odds of running into a real monster are basically zero, probably. Takaru tells Mui there's nothing wrong with being scared. After all, even the bravest warriors feel fear sometimes. What matters is doing your best with the skills you have. His little pep talk actually lifts Mui's spirits, and she promises to do her very best before dashing off into one of the tents. A moment later, Clay steps out, chuckling. He finds it pretty amusing that Takaru, of all people, just gave a motivational speech about courage, especially considering how hard he tried to avoid coming to the battlefield in the first place. Takaru can't argue with that logic. He admits it's a bit ironic, but defends himself by saying he just doesn't like getting dragged into unnecessary trouble. Then, glancing around, he notices Clay hanging out in the rear camp instead of being up front where the real action is. "Wait," Takaru says, "shouldn't you be out there with the others?" Clay admits that some old scars have started acting up again, so his body isn't quite working like it used to. Takaru asks if he's talking about those scars he noticed on Clay's back at the bathhouse. That question makes Clay freeze for a second. He's clearly bracing himself for judgment. But instead of disgust, Takaru just looks at him like, "Yeah. So what?" Clay sighs and explains that scars on a warrior's back are considered a stain on their honor, proof they were injured while running away. But Takaru just shakes his head. He can tell Clay got those scars while protecting someone, not out of cowardice. "You got hurt saving someone and still lived to tell the tale," Takaru says. "If anything, that's something to be proud of." Just then, a deep rumble echoes through the ground, hundreds of footsteps. Clay's expression hardens instantly. The front line formation must have been breached. The goblins are coming. He snatches up a spear, declaring, "I'll intercept them." Even though his scars are clearly killing him, Clay vows to protect Takaru, even if his body gives out. Takaru tries to tell him, "Hey, seriously, you don't have to," but before he can finish, Clay is already gone, sprinting into battle like an action hero with back pain. Turning toward the tents, Takaru spots Mui desperately healing a wounded adventurer. Seeing her work so hard, despite being terrified, makes him feel guilty for trying to take the easy route. With a sigh, Takara decides it's time to step up. He casts a massive barrier around the outpost to protect Mui and the other healers, then charges toward the front lines to face the goblins himself. Out there, chaos reigns. Adventurers are clashing with goblins in a desperate struggle to keep them from reaching the city. But at this rate, it's only a matter of time before the wall is breached. All of a sudden, Takara comes sprinting onto the battlefield and punches one of the goblins so hard that it rockets into a rock pillar with a crunch. Even he's a bit freaked out by what he just did. Fighting humanoid monsters isn't exactly something he's used to. But this isn't the time to think about morals or ethics, so he calls out to Bee, asking her to handle the rest. With a cheerful roar, Bee takes to the skies and unleashes a crackling wave of lightning that fries every goblin in sight. The smell of ozone and roasted monster fills the air, and the battlefield finally goes quiet. Takaru rushes over to check on the others and asks what happened. Diego explains that their formation was holding up fine at first, until a high-level goblin surgeon appeared out of nowhere. After that, everything fell apart. Thankfully, Clay showed up in time to save them and even managed to drive the goblin surgeon back, but in all the chaos, they got separated. Nobody knows where he is now, or if he's even still alive. Hearing that, Takaru immediately goes looking for him. Near the edge of the forest, he finds Clay surrounded, fighting for his life against a swarm of goblins. Even with pain shooting through his back, Clay manages to cut down a few of them with his spear. But the old scars flare up again, and the pain drops him to his knees. The goblins move in for the kill, their weapons raised, only to be vaporized by a bolt of lightning as Takara charges in. He stands beside Clay, smoke rising from his fingertips. Clay, shocked and exhausted, yells for Takara to get out of here, it's too dangerous. But Takara fires back, says the guy with a back full of old injuries. You shouldn't be pushing yourself like this. Before they can argue further, a heavy thud shakes the ground. The goblin surgeon emerges from the smoke, towering and snarling, its blades glinting under the moonlight. It lunges at them with terrifying speed, but both Takaru and Clay dive out of the way just in time. They both know the truth, retreating would be the smart move, but there's no way they'll outrun this monster. Despite the excruciating pain shooting through his back, Clay steadies his breathing, grips his spear, and takes a battle stance. I'll hold this thing off, he says firmly, so you can run, Takaru. No matter what, I'm not letting my friend die in a dump like this. Takaru is genuinely moved by Clay's resolve, though, to be fair, this is terrible timing for a heart-to-heart. Still, he tilts his head and asks, hey, by the way, do those scars on your back mean something to you? Clay, already confused, shouts, what kind of question is that right now? They just remind me of my failures, I hate them. Oh, perfect, Takaru replies, then you won't mind if I erase them. Before Clay can even ask what that means, Takara digs into his bag and splashes him with a bottle of Bee's dad's special magic water. Then he chants a full healing spell for good measure. In an instant, the scars vanish, but that's not all. Clay's body suddenly starts glowing like a forge. When the light fades, he's pitch black. Both men stare in shock. Takaru, that's new. Clay, did you just repaint me? Not only is the pain gone, but Clay feels a rush of overwhelming power coursing through him. His muscles tighten, his eyes gleam, and before he can process it, he's already slicing through goblins like a blender set to maximum. Within seconds, the entire horde is dust. Later that night, Clay storms into Takaru's room, looking very much unblackened again, but clearly fired up. What the hell did you do to me earlier? He demands. I still feel this weird energy burning inside me. Takaru, scratching his head, casually explains, oh, that. I used some ancient dragon magic water as a catalyst and added healing magic. Totally normal stuff. Clay, I beg your pardon. Takaru elaborates, you know, from V, the ancient dragon. He's Bee's dad, by the way. So technically, Bee's kind of ancient too. Clay just sits down slowly, face blank. Right, ancient dragon. Sure. Perfectly reasonable. After a moment of quiet disbelief, he looks back at Takaru. You're not exactly an ordinary person, are you? Takaru realizes he might have spilled way too many secrets but shrugs it off. Well, I guess it's fine. The gods never told me to hide it anyway. So yeah, I'm from another world. Clay freezes completely. For a solid 5 seconds, there's nothing but silence. Then he finally mutters, you're serious, aren't you? Takaru nods. Clay, I need a drink. Takaru sits Clay down and gives him the full "So I Got Ice Guide" story, from his reincarnation to meeting Bee, and all the way to accidentally turning people into high-performance models with dragon water. By the end of the explanation, Clay's brain looks like it's buffering. He rubs his temples and mutters, so, you died, got reborn, met a dragon. and now you're casually rewriting people's biology. Takaru, smiling sheepishly, when you say it like that, it sounds weird. Clay sighs. It is weird. But after everything he's witnessed, the insane strength, the magic, the crab incident, he can't exactly deny it either. Finally, Clay exhales and nods. All right, I'll keep your secret, Taku. But seriously, be more careful with that god-tier power of yours. Altering someone's body is kind of a big deal, not exactly something you should do between lunch and dinner. Takaru scratches his cheek awkwardly. Yeah, lesson learned. Next time, I'll ask for consent before accidentally evolving someone. Clay facepalms. Next time. Please don't make that sound like there'll be a next time. Her name is Ribble, and she's the one running the shop. Takaru asks her if she has any gatherer scissors in stock since his are pretty much on life support at this point. Unfortunately, Ribble shakes her head, she doesn't sell those. But on the bright side, she does know a great blacksmith who could make a pair for him. Of course, there's a catch, the blacksmith wants someone to fetch some materials in exchange. Takaru, being the kind of guy who can't resist side quests, says he's willing to hear the details. Ribble happily agrees and begins leading him toward her boss's workshop. As they walk down the hall, Takaru spots a group of blacksmiths hammering away in the forge. The heat, the sparks, the rhythm, he's genuinely impressed. Ribble smiles and admits that's exactly why she wants to become a top-tier blacksmith herself someday and forge a sword worthy of a hero. No pressure, right? They eventually reach the boss's office, and Ribble enthusiastically tells him she wants Takaru to help gather some Ilra ore so they can forge their dream sword. But before she can even finish, the boss practically explodes. No way am I sending a gatherer into the mines. Ribble protests that he should at least give Takaru a chance, and the two start bickering while Takaru stands there wondering what on earth Ilra ore even is. The boss explains that the mines are crawling with monsters, and lately, there have even been rumors of demons lurking down there. He can't, in good conscience, send Takaru to face those things. Ribble sheepishly admits that, yes, there's been a drop in miners lately, which the boss guesses she conveniently forgot to mention earlier. He scolds her, saying, a smith who's willing to risk someone else's life for their own ambition has no right to hold a hammer. Realizing her mistake, Ribble apologizes to Takaru and tells him to just forget the whole thing. But of course, Takaru is already too intrigued by the mention of rare ore and danger, it's basically his brand at this point. He asks if Ilra ore is truly the only material suitable for the sword. Ribble confirms it, so Takaru grins and offers to fetch the ore himself, if they agree to forge him a special pair of scissors in return. The boss stares at him like he's lost his mind. Were you even listening when I said there are monsters down there? Takaru just shrugs. Yeah, I'll be fine. I've handled worse. To prove his point, he casually pulls out one of the giant crab claws he's been lugging around. The boss blinks. That's a monster that even B-rank adventurers struggle with. After a long pause, the boss sighs and says, all right, fine. Try not to die. So, Takaru sets off immediately for the Ruhai mines. Along the way, the other passengers in the carriage gossip about how all the poisonous herbs in the area mysteriously vanished overnight. Takaru starts sweating a little because, that might have been his fault for overgathering. But he quickly brushes it off, no way it's that bad, right? A short while later, the carriage drops him off near a horse farm. Curious, Takaru goes to take a look, and there, he spots a familiar face, the same elf girl from before. She's in the middle of a heated argument with the farm owner because she specifically asked for a white horse that can gallop across the sky. The farmer, dead serious, points at a massive raven and says, around here, a horse is more of a category than a species. Takaru can't tell if this place runs on logic or pure chaos anymore, but at least it's never boring. The farmer explains that in this region, anything capable of carrying cargo is classified as a horse, even if it's, say, a giant raven. The elf realizes this misunderstanding is entirely her fault for not being more specific with her request and quickly apologizes for making a fuss. The farmer chuckles and tells her it's no big deal, but if she's looking for a white Pegasus, she'd have better luck searching in the Dwarven Kingdom. So, without a second thought, or any preparation whatsoever, the elf sets off toward the dwarves' territory. Meanwhile, Takaru continues his own journey. While passing through the forest, he notices a treasure trove of valuable ingredients scattered around. He even stumbles upon a patch of moon grass, and being the gatherer extraordinaire he is, he spends a few minutes harvesting it. Just as he's about to leave, though, he hears a familiar growl from behind a tree. When he goes to check, he finds that same elf girl from before, collapsed, starving, and looking like she lost another round against common sense. Feeling bad for her, again, Takaru gives her some food and water. She thanks him profusely and extends her hand for a handshake, but the smell radiating from her could probably knock out a goblin. Unable to endure it, Takara quickly casts clean on her before shaking hands. The elf introduces herself as Velveeta Brolita, and she sincerely thanks Takara for saving her, both now and the first time. Takaru insists it's fine and starts walking away, but Brolita stops him, saying she wants to repay him somehow. He says he doesn't expect any reward, but she's determined to help him no matter what. Seeing she won't take no for an answer, he finally gives up and lets her tag along. Over the next few hours, Takaru gathers herbs while Brolita tries to help. Unfortunately, her idea of help involves enthusiastically collecting piles of useless weeds. Later that evening, when they set up camp, Brolita offers to fetch firewood. Takaru tells her it's unnecessary since he already has fire magic stones, but Brolita argues that visible campfires show other travelers the area is safe. He admits that's actually pretty smart. A few minutes later, Brolita returns, carrying an entire log over her shoulder like it's a toothpick. Takaru tries to tell her that's way too big for firewood, but she smirks and says she's not done yet. With a swift motion, she tosses the log into the air, draws her blades, and slices it into dozens of neat little pieces before it even hits the ground. Takaru is left speechless. Not only is she absurdly strong, but her weapons are A rank, which he's never even seen before. That night, Takaru cooks some soup, and the moment Brolita tastes it, her eyes practically sparkle. She swears it's the most delicious thing she's ever eaten. As they eat, she asks if he's also heading to the Dwarf Kingdom. Takaru explains that he accepted a job to collect Ilra ore from the Ruhai mines nearby. Brolita says she's traveling in search of a white Pegasus, fulfilling her sister's lifelong wish. However, since she's once again enjoyed Takaru's cooking, she declares her debt to him has grown even larger and insists she must repay it somehow. So, Takaru decides to make it official. He hires her as his bodyguard, since adventuring is still pretty new to him. Brolita agrees happily, and for the first time, Takaru realizes that when she's not half dead from hunger, she's actually really cute. That night, Takaru barely gets a wink of sleep, not because of danger or monsters, but because Bee and Brolita snore like two dragons arguing in their sleep. He seriously considers casting silence, but decides that might count as assault. The next day, the group continues their journey until the Dwarven Kingdom finally comes into view across the river. Once they arrive, they make a beeline for the nearest tavern, because priorities. They order some local food, juicy meat wrapped in jupes, a famous Dwarven delicacy. As soon as Takaru takes a bite, his eyes light up. "This is amazing," he says with his mouth still full. Brolita nods in agreement, saying it's just as good as her friend described. Curious, Takaru asks what kind of friend she means. She casually replies, "Oh, just a lizardman I know." That's when Takaru hears a familiar voice from behind him, "You talking about me?" He turns around, and there sits Clay, the very same lizardman, munching on his meal like this is the most normal reunion ever. Takaru is shocked. Clay raises an eyebrow and says, "You left town without telling me again, didn't you?" So Takaru explains the whole situation, the blacksmith Gruss, the Ilra ore, and the deal for a special pair of scissors. Clay listens patiently, then sighs. He points out that Takaru's guild rank is still too low to officially accept a job like this, meaning he won't even be able to report it for evaluation. "So, are you at least getting paid well?" Clay asks hopefully. Takaru proudly replies, "Even better. I'm getting a custom-made pair of scissors." Clay just stares at him like he's reconsidering all his life choices. "That's not exactly what I'd call a fair trade," he mutters. But if Takaru is happy, who is he to argue? Still, he decides to tag along, not because he doesn't trust Takaru, okay, maybe a little, but because he's heading into the city anyway to repair his spear. Before Takaru can even protest, Brolita chimes in cheerfully, "Perfect. You can be his second bodyguard." And just like that, Takaru's solo trip has officially become a full-fledged party. The next morning, they all head to the gates of Vosel, the main city of the Dwarven Kingdom. There's a ridiculously long line of travelers waiting to get in, but Clay strolls over to the guards like he owns the place. A few minutes later, the group is waved through without waiting. Apparently, Clay is that famous. Once inside, a guard approaches and tells Clay that the king himself has requested an audience. Takaru is stunned. He had no idea Clay was on royal speaking terms. Clay scratches his head and says, "It's kind of a long story." The guard quickly summarizes, "Sir Clay once saved our kingdom from the Thunder King Xenom, so he's considered a hero." Clay, visibly embarrassed, corrects him. "I didn't actually do anything. The dwarves were under a demon's control, and the demon just ran away when it saw me. I think it just didn't feel like fighting that day." Apparently, the dwarves were so grateful they built a statue of Clay in his honor. Unfortunately, artistic accuracy isn't their strong suit. The statue looks more like a T-Rex wearing armor than a lizardman. Later, Clay and the group visit the royal castle to meet King Zeph. The first thing Clay does. He points at the statue and demands, "Whose idea was it to make me look like that?" King Zeph, laughing, replies, "I just thought it looked cool." The two clearly share a friendly history, but Takaru eventually interrupts their banter to present a letter of introduction from Gruss. The letter requests permission for Takaru to enter the Rohai mines and collect the Ilra ore. King Zeph says he normally wouldn't have an issue granting access, but the mines recently became infested with demons. He warns that it's no place for an ordinary gatherer. Of course, Takaru, being Takaru, just smiles confidently, which only worries the king more. King Zeph looks at Takaru seriously and asks, "Are you sure you still want to go in there? You do realize it's crawling with demons, right?" Takaru, being the absolute overconfident gatherer that he is, nods without hesitation. "Yup. I've faced worse." He hasn't. Seeing his determination, or maybe his lack of self-preservation, King Zeph sighs and grants permission. "Very well. You and your companions have my blessing. Uncover the truth behind this demon infestation." Clay immediately salutes and says he understands the mission, while Takaru just stands there like, "Wait, demons? That definitely wasn't on today's to-do list." The group eventually makes their way to the entrance of the Rohai mine, where the head receptionist of the local guild unlocks the gate for them. Inside, Takaru casts a light spell to brighten the tunnel. Unfortunately, there's not much to see besides dust and disappointment. He looks around and asks the guide, "Can we go a little deeper? The good stuff's always hidden, right?" The guide hesitates but agrees. However, before they can move an inch, Bee suddenly tenses up, her antennae twitching like she just smelled trouble. "Something's coming," she warns. Takaru immediately uses his skin ability and sees two giant spiders on the radar. And these aren't your average creepy crawlies, they're the kind that make you question why nature had to go this hard. Clay takes the lead, spinning his spear like a pro and impaling the first spider straight through the mouth. Meanwhile, Takaru blasts the second one with a stunning spell, holding it still long enough for Brolita to dash forward and slice it into neat spider sashimi. Crisis solved. As they head deeper into the mine, the air grows thick with magical energy. Takaru begins to notice faint traces of Ilra ore glimmering in the walls, but the deposits are too small to be worth mining. Just when he's about to give up, he spots something odd buried deeper in the rock face. "Alright, time for a little gentle excavation," he says, right before hurling an explosion spell at it. The blast clears the wall, revealing a massive glowing vein of hydrite, a rare and incredibly valuable ore that even the guide gasps at. "By the gods, that's hydrite. Do you realize how rare this is?" the guide exclaims. Takaru, completely missing the historical significance, just grins. "Cool. So, can I take it?" Before the guide can reply, V suddenly warns Takaru telepathically. Something's coming, and it's not human. The guide's face goes pale as his eyes widen in terror. It's a demon. Out of the darkness, a huge creature scuttles forward, its pincers gleaming, its shell cracked and glowing with red lines of corrupted mana. Takaru's reaction. He cracks his knuckles and grins. "Stand back, everyone. I'll take care of this one myself." Clay blinks. "Wait, you want to fight that alone?" Takaru shrugs. "Of course. Not because I hate demons or anything, but because that one's a crab, and me and Bee haven't had lunch yet." Brolita just facepalms. "He's fighting it because he wants to eat it, isn't he?" "Yes," Bee says proudly, "and I call dibs on the legs." Takaru tells Bee to give him some cover fire, but absolutely no fire or lightning, because they are not ruining perfectly good crab meat today. So, Bee lets out a sonic screech that stuns the giant crab, giving Takaru the chance to charge in and whack it on the head with his staff. Unfortunately for him, this crab is built like a tank, and it smacks him across the face for his efforts. Still, Takaru refuses to back down. When the crab tries to stomp him flat, he rolls out of danger just in time. Seeing an opening, Bee freezes one of the crab's legs. That sparks an idea. Takaru forms several ice needles and fires them all at once, freezing the entire crab solid like a seafood popsicle. Brolite is amazed at how effortlessly he defeated the monster. Clay, however, is furious. He immediately demands to know why Takaru fought that thing alone. Takaru sheepishly admits he got a little too excited, and also didn't want Clay or Brolite ruining the meat with their dirty weapons. Clay is horrified that Takaru actually plans to eat the demon crab, but more importantly, he reminds him that as his bodyguard, it's his job to fight and protect him. Takaru realizes he has a point and apologizes, promising to rely on him more from now on. Once the lecture is over, they drag the frozen crab away. Dinner prep begins early in this party, and continue mining. They've already collected all the gems in the area, but Takaru thinks there might be an even bigger vein deeper inside. The guide is beyond grateful. Takaru not only defeated the demon plaguing the mine but also uncovered a new ore vein. He has no idea how he'll ever repay him. Later, they all return to the castle, where Zeph receives the report about Takaru's achievements. The king is astonished by everything Zeph hears from Zambo, and to prove it, Zambo asks Takaru to show the king the giant crab he defeated. Takaru hesitates, because, well, it's a massive seafood corpse, but the king really wants to see it. So Takaru opens his item box and drops the enormous crab onto the floor like he's showing off groceries. The king is stunned by its size and immediately declares that such an achievement deserves a reward. Takaru's request: "Can I keep the crab's body?" The king is confused, as any sane person would be, but he allows it. A few minutes later, Takaru and the group walk out of the castle, and both Takaru and B are practically drooling at the thought of the feast awaiting them. Even better, the crab's shell is perfect material for the custom scissors Takaru ordered, so this mission turned out to be a jackpot. The next day, things get even better. Zeph rewards Brolight with a white Pegasus, since he heard she was searching for one. Though honestly, she didn't exactly contribute much on this trip. Still, she's thrilled. The king also returns Clay's repaired spear, and Clay is very happy with the result. Brolight announces she has to return home with the Pegasus. It's a gift for her sister, and she thanks Takaru over and over, promising to repay him someday, even if it takes her entire life. Takaru tries to say it's no big deal, but she's already emotionally locked in. Later, Takaru and Clay return to the guild, where Ariana rushes over to greet them. She's relieved to see Takaru safe, and shocked to see Clay too. So she asks whether they formed a party together. Takaru is about to explain that they just bumped into each other, but Clay immediately cuts him off and proudly declares that they have formed a party. Before Takaru can correct her, Ariana sprints away to inform the guild master, officially sealing Clay's impulsive declaration. Takaru turns to Clay and asks why he would suddenly claim they'd formed a party, but Clay just shrugs and says it's harmless. After all, he already knows Takaru isn't a normal human, and with how often Takaru dives headfirst into danger, someone responsible should probably keep an eye on him. As much as Takaru doesn't like being strong-armed, he admits that having Clay as a teammate doesn't sound too bad. They talk it out and officially form the Black Azure Dragon Party. Afterward, Takaru heads to the smithing shop to deliver the materials he gathered. The moment the boss sees all the pure light he brought, the man freezes like he just saw the heavens open. Takaru panics for a second, thinking he messed something up. He thought pure light was better than normal ore, but now he's doubting everything. He asks if they can still finish their project with the Ildrite ore, and both Ribble and Gases immediately burst into tears of joy, clutching the stones like babies. They never dreamed they'd ever touch such pure material. When they finally stop crying, they tell Takaru there's no way they can afford to pay him properly for this much valuable ore. But Takaru waves it off. He doesn't want money. All he wants is a custom pair of scissors made just for him. Before that, though, he wants them to use the Elite to craft the best sword possible and win the sword-making contest. Half a month later, Takaru is enjoying a quiet beer at the tavern when Wade barges in. Someone important is looking for him and left a formal letter. Clay takes one look and recognizes the crest of House Lusilv. Wade explains that it's from the local lord. Takaru, of course, immediately assumes it's going to be a massive hassle and starts plotting his escape, but Wade reassures him that this particular noble is actually pleasant. Reluctantly trusting Wade, Takaru opens the letter to see what's inside. The letter turns out to be a formal request for Takaru and Clay to visit the Lord's manor so he can bestow honors upon them. Clay is surprised to see his own name included, but Wade explains that the Lord must have heard they formed a party and wanted to invite both members. Very polite, very official, very troublesome in Takaru's opinion. The promise of receiving honors sounds nice, but Takaru can't shake the suspicion that this is just a fancy way to drag him into something. Clay agrees and says the Lord probably wants to meet B, since baby dragons are practically celebrity material. That only makes Takaru panic harder. The last thing he wants is some noble trying to adopt B like a fancy pet. Wade quickly reassures him that the Lord isn't that kind of person, and even if he was, he legally can't just snatch someone's dragon. Still uneasy, Takaru reluctantly agrees to go. So the two hop into the noble's carriage and head toward the manor. On the way, Takaru notices lots of people staring, and immediately assumes something's wrong with his face or hair. But Clay explains that being summoned by the Lord is incredibly rare. Adventurers usually dream about this sort of career-boosting opportunity. When they finally arrive, Takaru is stunned by the sheer size of the estate. It looks less like a house and more like a castle that ate another castle. At the entrance, they're greeted by Raymond, the head butler, who politely welcomes them and escorts them inside, straight past the grand foyer. Takaru finds a perfectly lined row of maids waiting to greet him, and he's honestly impressed. They're so synchronized they could form their own idol group. As they head toward the staircase, a man walks by, gives them the side eye, and continues on like they're pieces of furniture. Takaru decides not to bother. He's met goblins with better manners. A moment later, a little girl comes charging down the stairs and, without a hint of hesitation, demands that he hand over B because she wants him. Takaru, in full cold and flat mode, tells her that's not happening. She looks genuinely shocked that he's not instantly obeying her. She starts talking about how dragons are noble creatures, and only someone like her deserves to have one, but the way she's talking sounds suspiciously like someone handed her a script 5 minutes ago. While she rambles, Takaru checks her status window. Her name is Tyrus, and she's the Lord's daughter. She doesn't seem like a bad kid, just misinformed. So he kneels down and calmly asks her why she thinks she has the right to take B. Tyrus gets flustered and explains that Bernard told her all adventurers are lowlives who must obey nobles. Suddenly everything makes sense. Someone's been stuffing her head with nonsense. Takaru, meanwhile, has no clue who this Bernard guy is, but he's already on the mental, annoying people list. He explains to Tyrus that B is part of his family, and there is absolutely no universe where he would hand him over. When she hears the word family, it finally clicks for her. Asking him to give up B is like someone demanding she abandon her family. She immediately gets it. Takaru gently asks why she wanted a dragon so badly. Tyrus says she wanted to show it to her mother because it's one of her mother's greatest wishes, and saying that makes her sad. Just then, a man walks over, sees his daughter upset, and asks what's wrong. Tyrus calls him father, and Takaru realizes this is the Lord himself. He's surprised. This man looks nothing like the stern, bald, pudgy noble he imagined. The Lord introduces himself as Belminant, and after sitting down for tea with Takaru and Clay, he apologizes for his daughter's behavior. Takaru brushes it off, and Clay asks why they were summoned. Belminant explains that it concerns his wife, Muiria. Belminant explains that his wife has been bedridden for half a year, and he recently heard rumors about how Takaru healed a frail, sickly man overnight. So he's hoping Takaru might be able to help his wife too. Takaru knows his magic can cure most illnesses, but the last time he did a full body heal, Clay accidentally evolved into Ultra Clay, so he's understandably terrified of turning Muiria into a Pokemon evolution by accident. Belminant goes on to explain why Tyrus tried to steal B earlier. In a few days, she has to return to school in the royal capital, and she wanted to leave something adorable, like B, by her mother's side to cheer her up. She may be misguided, but deep down she's a good kid. The story is so touching that Clay and B start crying like they've been stabbed with onion magic. Moved by their sincerity, Takaru agrees to help, though he still worries this might bite him later. Belminant is overjoyed and leads him to his wife's room. He gently tells Muiria that he's brought someone who might be able to help her. Takaru scans her, and what appears on her status window nearly knocks him over. She has everything: severe cataracts, anemia, liver poisoning, kidney poisoning, and that's just the opening act. Honestly, the fact she's still alive is a medical miracle. He can heal most of it, but there's one problem. There's something called iver poisoning, and he's never heard of it before. He doesn't even know whether his magic can fix that. So he asks Belminant if he's truly willing to entrust his wife's life to him. Both Belminant and Muiria place their full faith in him. Clay asks if Takaru plans to use the same technique he used on him, but Takaru shakes his head. That method puts way too much strain on the body, and in Muiria's condition, it might do more harm than good. He knows there's no way she can handle anything too intense right now, so he decides to start with something simple, like making this cave of eternal sadness look less depressing. Since all the windows are shut to protect Nalisha's overly sensitive eyes, step 1 is fixing that problem. He gently places his hand over her face and uses healing magic, being extra careful not to overdo it, because the last thing he wants is to accidentally heal her to death. When he's done, he tells Nalisha to slowly open her eyes, and she freezes in shock. She can actually see again. Takaru is thrilled. Since the darkness is no longer necessary, he whips out his staff, cleans up the dusty room with magic, and dramatically throws open the windows. Sunshine floods in, and Nalisha practically melts with happiness, finally able to enjoy sunlight without feeling like a vampire at a beach party. All thanks to Takaru. As much as he wants to continue fixing her health problems, he has something urgent to discuss. He asks Bellman to speak in private. Once alone, Takaru explains that Bellman's wife is suffering from iver poisoning, caused by ingesting iver toxin. Bellman starts to say there's no way Nalisha would be careless enough to eat poison, but then it hits him like a flying brick. Someone must have been poisoning her. And he feels awful for never noticing. He asks if there's anything he can do, but Takaru admits he has no cure. He doesn't even fully understand how iver toxin works. He asks about an antidote, but Bellman says that's impossible. Avert toxin is an ancient forbidden poison, long lost, and so is its antidote. However, Bellman does know one place to look for clues. He brings out dusty old record books written by former lords. They might contain something useful, except for one problem: they're all written in an ancient language no one has been able to decode for decades. Because of course they are. Thanks to Takeru's translation skill, he can read the ancient text with zero effort, like it's written in casual modern slang. But reading every book one by one for Ivor Poison info would take an eternity, maybe two. He wishes he could just search for keywords like a magical Google. Then it hits him, he can. He modifies his search skill to detect which book contains info about Ivor Poison. And yes, technically, he could have used the same skill to find the poison directly, but he didn't think of that. He's a genius, not a perfectionist. He activates the skill, a single book lights up, and he flips through it until he finds what he needs. It's the diary of a boy named Palola, who writes about stumbling upon a field of Ivor flowers near a lake with a weird horse-shaped rock nearby. Cray recognizes the place, he saw it during one of his travels to a village. He marks the location on the map and says the village is called Asth. Bellman realizes Asth is in the Venown region, outside the Lukovich territory. That means at least 5 days of travel. Hearing that, Takeru decides to leave immediately, no time to sit around reading ancient emo diaries. As the horses are prepared, Bernard watches from the window with pure contempt, like a man who just discovered someone drank his last bottle of milk. Meanwhile, Takeru is at one of the castle walls placing down magic crystals. Bellman approaches, confused, and asks what on earth he's doing this time. So, Takeru explains that he was just setting up a small safeguard in case someone tries to harm Militia while he's gone. Just then, Tyeris comes running over, out of breath and clearly embarrassed, because she wants to apologize for how she acted earlier. He came all the way here to save her mother, yet she treated him like a walking pet dispenser. She feels awful about it now. But Takeru gently tells her that what matters is recognizing when you're wrong and fixing it, a life skill far more valuable than memorizing noble etiquette lines from Bernard's sketchy wisdom. Hearing this, Tyeris perks up, and he tells her to think for herself before acting next time. She promises she won't repeat the same mistake. Before leaving, Takeru gives her one last piece of advice: someone might try to convince her that he's an enemy or a fraud. If that happens, she shouldn't answer immediately, she should talk to her father first. Tyeris nods seriously, promising to remember. With that settled, Takeru and Cray head out. To save time, Takeru casts a speed-boosting spell on the horses, turning the journey into a magical version of fast travel. After several days, they reach the village of Asth, only to find a barren wasteland. The last time Cray visited, it was a lush farming village. Now it looks like someone hit the area with a no-rain cheat code. Takeru starts to worry that the lake mentioned in the old diary might have dried up. Cray reassures him, lakes don't vanish that fast. And he's right, sort of. The lake is still there, but the water looks funky, like someone mixed it with swamp soup. Takeru inspects it and immediately senses intentional contamination. Before they can investigate further, a group of sickly villagers surrounds them, determined to protect what remains of their home. They demand to know why Takeru and Cray have come here. Takeru realizes the villagers aren't actually threatening them, they're just desperate people protecting what little they have left. So he calmly explains that he and Cray are adventurers from Belmanent's territory and that they've come on a mission to collect a rare material. The villagers look doubtful, so they demand proof. Cray flashes his A-rank armband like he's showing off VIP access at a concert. That convinces them, and the villagers lower their improvised weapons. Just as Takeru starts asking if they know anything useful, one boy suddenly collapses. When Takeru lifts him, he notices something alarming: the kid is way too light, practically featherweight. Turning to the adults, he asks if they've been getting enough to eat. Their expressions say it all. Then they explain the situation. About 10 months ago, their lake water suddenly became cursed, and even their well turned undrinkable. With no clean water for crops or drinking, starvation slowly set in. Then a merchant named Ingak showed up, claiming he could help. He wanted a special flower that only grows near the lake, a village secret. Desperate, they agreed to trade 1 flower per month for 60 barrels of water. But that wasn't nearly enough for both drinking and farming, so they've been suffering ever since. After hearing everything, Takeru is certain of one thing: this Ingak guy isn't just suspicious, he's 100% certified villain material. The villagers are stunned, they genuinely believed Ingak was helping them. But Takeru explains that when he inspected the lake earlier, he found clear signs of deliberate contamination. And it's just a little too convenient that Ingak strolled into town right after the water turned deadly. Even if that were pure coincidence, anyone who demands payment in the form of a dangerous toxin is waving more red flags than a parade. The village chief is horrified to realize they've been tricked this whole time. Meanwhile, Takeru is furious. This merchant didn't just poison Militia, he also crippled an entire village and left innocent children starving, just to get his hands on Ivor. Takeru vows he won't let Ingak get away with any of this. But first, he needs to help the villagers. He turns to B, asking him to fly up and use spirit magic. B immediately understands the plan, so he takes off and summons thick rain clouds over the entire village. Within moments, refreshing rain pours down, giving everyone clean water at last. But Takaru isn't stopping there. He casts a massive clean spell on the villagers, because after months without a bath, even the trees were judging them. Then he uses repair magic to fix their crumbling homes. Finally, he pulls out a giant pot and whips up a warm meal for everyone. The villagers are beyond grateful, especially the chief. The children, who have instantly become Takaru's biggest fans, happily offer to show him their secret hideout in the woods. Takaru follows the children to their secret base, which turns out to be an old storage shed overflowing with Lita fruit. He's confused. How could the village be starving with this much food lying around? The kids explain that the fruit is so salty it could probably pickle a dragon, and since they had no water to dilute it, it was basically useless. Curious, Takaru bravely tastes one. His eyes sparkle instantly. Sure, it's not edible in its current form, but this could absolutely be turned into soy sauce. Priorities. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, a loud alarm suddenly rings through the halls. Tairis immediately sprints toward her mother's room, because before leaving, Takaru set up a barrier around Militia, warning that it would activate only if someone approached with malicious intent. Meaning someone is trying to kill her mother right now. She rushes to the room and finds Bernard lingering at the door. Everything clicks at once. Now, a normal person would run for help. Tairis, however, chooses the confront the possibly murderous suspect head-on route. She asks if he really intends to harm her mother. Bernard denies everything, acting insulted, but Tairis points out that the barrier only reacts to malicious intent, so he must have been planning something awful. Cornered, Bernard tries to paint Takaru as some greedy adventurer scamming their family for money, but Tairis refuses to be fooled again. She's learned her lesson. Belmonent soon arrives and immediately understands the situation. But since Bernard keeps insisting he's totally innocent, Belmonent decides to give him a fair trial, well, as fair as you can be when the suspect is standing outside a poisoned woman's door like a cartoon villain. Bernard's excuse is that Takaru must have lied about the barrier detecting malicious intent. Belmonent isn't convinced, especially since Takaru healed Militia's eyes faster than most people can boil water. Still, if Bernard claims he had no ill intent, he can prove it by drinking the special water he planned to give Militia. Bernard immediately panics. Since the water is laced with Ivor poison, drinking it would be very fatal. His terrified expression confirms everything Belmonent suspected. So Belmonent tosses the water right into Bernard's face. Bernard screams like he's melting, only for Belmonent to sigh and inform him it's just normal water. He swapped the poison beforehand. So, Bernard isn't dying, but he is going to prison for a long, long time. After dragging him away, the staff search Bernard's room and find a mysterious letter. Raymond brings it to Belmonent, and whatever's written there shocks him to the core. Meanwhile, back in the ruined village, Ingak shows up to collect another batch of Ivor flowers. But the village chief is nowhere to be seen. A local tells him the chief went to guide the adventurers. Oh, and by the way, the villagers have learned that the precious Ivor flowers were being used to make poison. So they won't be selling any more. Ingak realizes his scam is officially over, and his face drops faster than a merchant's profit margin during a clearance sale. ING decides that if the villagers won't hand over any more Ivor, he'll just burn the entire village down and take what he wants like a full-time arsonist, part-time scammer. Meanwhile, Bernard, on his way to prison, starts smiling to himself, because of course he thinks this story still revolves around him. Over by the lake, Takaru scans the Ivor flowers and learns they supposedly grow from the tears of a sacred beast. Curious, he asks the chief, who explains that long ago Lord Hoffaulkner, a sacred beast, saved their ancestors from a lake demon. Ever since then, the flowers have kept growing. Takaru hesitates, worried about taking something so meaningful, but the chief assures him that, after saving their village, he's welcome to take as many as he likes. Just as Takaru bends down to happily pluck a flower and celebrate his mission, a villager comes sprinting toward them, shouting that something terrible has happened. They rush back to find the village completely engulfed in flames. Takaru doesn't know the culprit yet, but first things first, put out the fire. He tells B to summon more rain while he and Clay rescue the villagers. Thankfully, no one is seriously hurt. When they ask what happened, a villager explains that Inga showed up demanding more Ivor. But now that they know it's poisonous, they refused, and Inga threw a tantrum so big he practically exploded into chaos and fire. Takaru can't believe he'd stooped this low. Things get even worse. The chief discovers Gonza is missing. An elderly woman claims she saw Inga dragging him away to force him to reveal the location of the Ivor flowers. Furious, Takaru immediately uses search magic and locates Gonza and Inga hiding in a fort near the lake. Takaru and Clay mount their horses and head straight for the fort. The chief tries to warn them that confronting Inga alone is too dangerous, but Takaru assures him there's nothing to worry about. He has a strong A-rank adventurer with him, so rescuing Gonza will be a piece of cake. When they reach the fort, B scouts ahead and reports back that Inga and his men are throwing a party. Clay is furious. The idea that they can burn down a village, kidnap a child, and then celebrate sends him over the edge, and he begins to transform from pure rage. But Takaru quickly tells him to calm down. Charging in recklessly will only put Gonza in danger. Clay realizes Takaru is right and apologizes. Then he asks the obvious question: how are they supposed to infiltrate the fort without being spotted? Takaru thinks for a moment and decides to use an invisibility spell, which works perfectly. Nobody notices them as they slip inside. They search the fort quietly, but Gonza is nowhere to be found. So Clay suggests they track down Inga directly since he's guaranteed to know where the boy is. Eventually, they locate the room where Inga's men are still partying. The thugs are bragging loudly about burning the village down, saying the villagers deserved it for daring to defy Inga. They also complain that the kidnapped boy still hasn't revealed the location of the Ivor flowers, but they're confident they'll beat the truth out of him sooner or later. It's the last step in their plan to inflate the market price of Ivor. Their scheme is simple: once Maltia dies, and the world learns that even the greatest healers couldn't save her, the value of Ivor poison will skyrocket, making them rich. Takaru and Clay overhear everything from right outside the door, and now Clay is angrier than ever. Takaru tells Clay that he's free to charge in and crack a few skulls, as long as he doesn't kill anyone. And that's all Clay needed to hear. He bursts through the door like an outraged gorilla and starts eating bandits across the room. One bandit flies past Inga, and that's when the merchant finally realizes he is in deep trouble. Panicking, he orders one of his men to release the thing. The henchman nervously reminds him that they still can control it, but Inga doesn't care. He wants chaos, right now. Meanwhile, still invisible, Takaru strolls up beside Inga and casually asks where the kidnapped kid is. Inga, overwhelmed and not paying attention, accidentally blurts out that Gonza is in the other building. Takaru heads outside and spots the building, but there's a guard blocking the door. No problem, B volunteers. He launches himself straight into the guard with a headbutt so powerful it sends the poor guy through the wall like a cartoon character. Inside, Takaru finds Gonza locked in a cell. He smashes the lock with his bare hand, and the boy nearly bursts into tears of relief. But just as they start heading out, a massive crash shakes the fort. Bandits sprint past them shrieking because a tentacle monster has been unleashed. Takaru squints. Clay definitely didn't have tentacles last time I checked. He stops one of the fleeing bandits to ask what's going on, and the guy screams that it's the lake demon, so they all need to run for their lives. Takaru knows Clay is still in his transformed form, so he should be fine, But depending on the demon's abilities, he might still need backup. He tells Gonza to hop off so he can join the fight, but the kid clings to him like a koala. The boy is terrified, so Takaru decides to bring him along. He sets up a protective barrier around Gonza and sprints toward the chaos. When they reach the main hall, they find Clay locked in combat with the lake demon. And while Takaru expected some terrifying, nightmare-inducing creature, the monster is basically just a giant, oversized animal with attitude. Takaru scans the creature to see what it can do, and the startup screen basically tells him, regenerates instantly, grows poison-tipped tentacles, and exists solely to ruin your day. It also states that the demon was summoned by Inga, who, ironically, is already lying on the floor nearby because the monster smacked him around. Inga begs Takaru to save him, but Takaru doesn't see much point in rescuing a guy who has caused nothing but suffering. Still, he can't let the men die before he faces justice. So when the anemone demon goes in for the finishing blow, Takaru throws up a light barrier around Inga. The impact still knocks him unconscious, but at least he's alive, and unfortunately for him, that means he still gets arrested later. With Inga safely knocked out, Takaru rushes back to Clay, who admits he's having trouble because the monster keeps regenerating every tentacle he slices off. Takaru figures that if the thing keeps regrowing parts, the answer is simple: freeze everything at once. He fires off an ice spell, freezing the tentacles and slowing the monster down. But it isn't enough. So Takaru yells to Clay that the only way to kill it for good is to crush the brain. Clay nods, charges forward, and punches the monster square in the face. It works, but it also makes the creature spaz out violently, launching Takaru straight out of the fort like a rag doll. As he's flung into the air, he manages to toss Gonza upward to be for safety. Unfortunately, he can't throw himself, so he plummets straight into the poisoned lake. Even with all his abilities, swimming in toxic demon soup is a terrible survival plan. His life starts flashing before his eyes, mostly embarrassing moments he'd rather forget, when suddenly he's yanked out of the water by a talking horse. The horse introduces herself as Hafalkner, and Takaru immediately realizes she must be the sacred beast the villagers talked about. Takaru apologizes for falling into the lake, but Hafalkner immediately tells him there's nothing to apologize for. He actually purified her land. She explains that long ago the area was overflowing with stagnant mana, so she used her remaining power to create iver flowers infused with purification magic to keep everything clean. But after exhausting her strength, she turned into a statue. The iver flowers would have protected the land forever, until some evil humans with the morals of wet socks came along and poisoned the waters, turning the whole region into a wasteland. But because Takaru absorbed all the toxins, the lake is purified again, and Hafalkner has finally regained her strength. She's genuinely grateful. Takaru, meanwhile, still doesn't understand how falling face first into poison equals purification, but hey, if it helped her, he'll take the compliment. She gently drops him off near the cliff where Clay and Gonza are waiting. They're shocked to see him alive and immediately ask how he survived. When he says, "The lake god saved me," they stare at him like he inhaled too many mana fumes, because they can't see Hafalkner at all. The sacred beast turns to Takaru once more and says she will always come to his aid if he ever needs help. Then she vanishes like a dramatic stage performer. Takaru returns to the village to reunite Gonza with his family before heading back to the mansion. Traveling by horse would take forever, so he decides to try out a new spell he invented. He arranges magic stones in a circle, tells everyone to stand inside, and activates a gate spell, instantly teleporting the whole group home. Very convenient. Slightly terrifying. Once back at the mansion, Takaru synthesizes an antidote using the iver he collected. After giving it to Militia, her iver poisoning is completely cured. She still needs time to recover from other symptoms, but the hardest part is over, and Tyeris couldn't be happier. With the main crisis resolved, Takaru heads back to the village to help rebuild the homes destroyed by the fire. While assisting, he proposes an idea to the village chief. Earlier, he found some lettuce fruit that tasted suspiciously like soy sauce. But when he tries to explain the wonders of soy sauce to the villagers, they stare at him like he's speaking ancient dragon dialect. So Takaru prepares a plate of baked potatoes with soy sauce for the village chief to try, and the man absolutely falls in love with it. His proposal is simple. He wants the chief to sell the village's entire stock of LA's fruits, so he can turn them into soy sauce and sell it back in Belkane. If things go well, soy sauce could even become the village's specialty, finally pulling them out of poverty. The chief happily agrees to Takaru's deal. With business wrapped up, Takaru gets ready to head back to Bilam. But before he can take a single step, a bright light flashes in the sky, and Hafalkner appears right in front of him again. This time, Clay also sees her, and he's just as stunned as Takaru. After all, no one expects to casually see a sacred beast on a Tuesday afternoon. Takaru asks Hafalkner why she's here, and she explains that she got bored living by that lake for so many years. Since Takaru seems like an interesting human, which is a polite way of saying chaos magnet, she decides to accompany him on his journey. Then, with the confidence of someone who knows they're the main character, she transforms into a beautiful woman. She proudly announces that Takaru is free to ride her anytime he wants, because she is the greatest steed in the entire world. She can't wait to see what he does next. Takaru, meanwhile, has a sinking feeling that having Hafalkner around is going to turn into a massive headache.